Program Director, and good morning, everybody. In framing this presentation, I want to declare my bias. In other words, what I'm presenting is contested. Is contested from many areas. As policy is presented, so is policy making presented, contested. And I want to make a difference between policy development and policy making. While I contribute to policy development through debate and other things, I am not a policy maker, and I'm not a policy decision maker. So I declare my bias, and this is based on my academic background. The analysis that I used in this presentation is informed by studies of innovation systems. And the presentation as a whole highlights key insights from the report, and then I conclude. This is about my own bias. First, my training is in history, and I use history here to mean study of change and continuity. And my other background is in applied linguistics, and I use applied linguistics here to mean language use. And finally, I'm trained as an economic geographer, and in economic geography, we study the distribution of economic activities and their impact on society. But this bias, especially on economic geography, can in a way translate into innovation geography, where we would look at studies that focus on the distribution of innovation activities and their impact on society. What I'm trying to say is that the innovation activities are not distributed equally throughout society. There are more innovation activity in some areas, and there are less in other areas. So the impact may not be the same. In this presentation, I want to touch on the issue of policy and emphasize that the policy intent of the state is to achieve a science literate and a science aware society. Likewise, the policy intent is to achieve the promise of science and technology skills, especially among our youth. The final policy intent in this presentation is that of setting priorities for science and technology research. The report talks about pride amongst the public regarding science and technology achievements. What the report or the researchers found was that 58% of the public expressed pride in science and technology achievements. That is, the majority of the people of South Africa do have pride in S&T achievements. And the highest levels of pride came from youth, learners, and students. So it's young people who have the highest pride in S&T. But the same group of people, they also reported high levels of home education support and exposure to science and technology information. Maybe the point here the report is making is that sometimes to become a scientist, it starts from home. If we are exposed to a father or a mother who is a scientist or is highly educated, we are most likely to follow suit. But let me also say that while we have this education support, sometimes the education support is not gender neutral. So the views of those who are dominated at home may be the views that are followed. And the views of those who are less dominant may not be followed at home. And again, there were some low levels of pride that was reported among those with limited home education support. There was also low levels of pride amongst those with primary and no formal education. And there was also low levels of pride amongst those living in marginalized settings, such as informal settlements, and I may want to add rural areas or marginalized rural areas. Now I come to promise of science and technology skills for young people. The report highlights that those with higher levels of education expressed high hopes in science and technology. Indeed, young people are encouraged to acquire S&T skills in order to respond to their socio-economic challenges, and among these challenges is employment and employability. Here I differentiate between employment and employability. Someone may qualify but is not employable because there's a mismatch between the job and what he can offer. And what we want amongst the graduates with S&T is not just employment, they should be employable across sectors. And they should at some point be able to create their own employment. So when I talk about employment and employability, I want to emphasize also that this kind of employment may extend to science and technology-led entrepreneurship. This is entrepreneurship that is informed by science and the technology and the advances in technology. There were higher research priorities that came from the report. And the highest priority that came from the report has to do with energy supply. So people have concerns about energy supply, and this was followed by clean water and better supply of water. And the third highest S&T research priority relates to quality of education. But there was also lowest research priority, as highlighted in the report, has to do with space and stars. And if you look at the three highest priorities of research, indeed, they reflect the top challenges facing our national innovation system or our country. So what can be done to improve pride in science? Okay, what I'm trying to do here is to conclude by asking two questions. And the two questions I conclude with are that the first question is, what can be done to improve pride in science and technology across race, across class, gender, rural and urban settings? That's the first question. The second question is, what roles should government, business, universities, science councils, civil society play in order to achieve the promise and priorities set in the national system of innovation? I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndabeni. Questions, comments?
I am Zama Moni from Radio Riverside again. Professor, there are a lot of talks on supporting education from an institutional levels, for example, in schools and in tertiary institutions, but there are very few talks on support when it comes to home education support. So what can be done to improve home education support, since it also plays a role in people's interest in science?
Hi, my name is Leboranti Masera from African Female Voices. I think my question is just around not necessarily employability, but sparking an interest in science. What we've seen in the recent years is that there's been a move towards a more decentralized version of science and technology. By that I mean, for example, if you were to study BSc in computer science, right? You are innately battling with a student who studies an 8-week boot camp course, right? And then you find that in corporate, because I also work in the corporate space, there are more people who don't go the formal route, right? Who in essence pull the value of that specific qualification down, and you find that students are not as keen to study those or follow the traditional route of going to university because they know that they'll be competing with people who don't even have a university degree. Especially this is more common in tech, where there are a lot of short courses and students then opt to say, you know what, I don't want to go the science and technology route using university. I want to do a boot camp course. Or you find that there are students who think that, you know what, traditionally I would have earned more in this course because it's a sought after course, but then because education is being decentralized in a way, it's not necessary for me to go to university. So in light of promoting science and technology, what other routes and measures can we take to make sure that the essence of getting a university degree is kept and there's value in the market? I think another layer to this is just around the employability aspect. You spoke a bit about it. What we're seeing is that there are benchmark courses that if I'm Lebo and I'm from rural Limpopo, I'm told that I have to take science and technology for me to escape poverty, but the only way I can do that is if I don't study a Bachelor of Social Science or a BSc in microbiology. I should either be a doctor, an accountant, or an engineer. If I take any other science route, I won't be employable. There aren't enough jobs. So how do we tackle that to not only bridge the information gap and show students that there is value in what you're doing, but also bridge the gap in employability? Yeah.
Let me take something that sounds very simple and bring some complexity to it. Support in terms of home education is not as easy as we might think. It depends, one, if your mother and father has never been to school, you are unlikely to receive more support for science and technology. In the way that our society is structured, most parents, they leave at 5 a.m. and they come back in the evening because the better schools are somewhere else. By the time they come back, the parents are tired, the student is tired. So it's not that very easy. But it's something that can be encouraged. For example, home doesn't necessarily mean your own home. The neighbor, if is available, can assist. And it also depends on the background of the parents. So if the parents' background is theology, and I say theology because I wanted to do theology, but I failed. If your background is theology, and your son or your daughter comes and asks a question, and you need to support it to answer that question, and the background is completely different, it's unlikely that you're going to support. If your background is in arts and your son brings a science-related question, you may just give support as a parent, but you are unlikely to help him get to the answers. But the support itself will encourage the son, the daughter to study even hard. And with that support in mind, because now he's in an environment that's encouraging, and therefore is able to do even more. Let me share this as well. When I was at university and we were doing applied linguistics, what we did, we tried to support those who were weak in English and not English as first language. And when we supported them with language, talk, read, and write, their confidence was up. When their confidence was up, they got more marks in English, but interestingly, their marks also improved in other subjects. Because I come from a social sciences background and my son is good in mathematics, at some point I had to sit down with him And I set few priorities, only two. I said, you know, my son, if you can do well in English, you will do well. Because it is through the language that he thinks and processes things. The second one was, if you can do well in maths, you will understand abstract thinking, because maths is abstract. Sometimes the reason people don't do maths is not because they hate maths, it's because of maths itself. Maths can be abstract. You need people who understand maths to make it more relevant. And in primary school teachers or high school teachers in rural areas where those who are highly qualified don't want to go and teach, there are difficulties in encouraging maths. What other teachers do as well, when they see that the score is going to be bad, they then discourage students from doing pure maths and push them to do maths literacy. So it's quite a complex issue. The issue, and thank you, Zama, for asking that question. The question from African Female Voices, boot camp versus university qualification. I want to argue that education is not neutral. There's education for this, there's education for that. So there's education for production. If you want to be productive, there'll be education for that. Let me also become more controversial. There's education for working class. Some education system produce and reproduce workers. And so that's education designed for working class. But it's not, and that intent of education policies are not always clear. But what I want to argue, that there is no education that is neutral. It's contested. There's this content, there's another content, and people want this and want that. So people who want to have hands-on experience, and they don't want to go to university, I think I would say it's fine. But the problem with boot camp education versus university education is that boot camp education is thin on theory. It's rich on practice. And there are two interrelationships. Sometimes you start with practice to inform theory. Sometimes you start with theory, we have got a better practice. Theory helps us understand the practice better. So that boot camp is its own. But now, as an emerging industrialist, I found something, and I thought I knew. When we were constructing the factory, we employed a number of people. Those coming from TVET, they had more confidence in what I want to do. But there was something they did not know. There is university knowledge which gives you the certificate, but there's industry knowledge. The industry knowledge is sticky, it's local, it remains with the industry, it's not in the textbook. So while a student passed at university, it shows he or she is capable, because the industry is advancing. Certain machines are made elsewhere. I'll tell you one example. We have engineers in South Africa. There was a problem. And the problem was in Ndabeni. The ship could not move for whatever reason. They did everything, the ship couldn't move. They had to call an expert, an engineer in Germany, because the ship was built in Germany, to come and tell them what to do. And so he spent less than 30 minutes, the ship moved. So some of the knowledge within the industry actually that comes from both university and the industry. And in the industry, if you have a standard 10 and they are willing to be trained, you may get the same amount of money we pay to the TVET because we're interested in production. But we need education, we need people who are educated so that they can lead us. In order to have better industries in S&T, we definitely need people with education because they can take this country forward. I thank you.
I'm just going to answer one question. I won't take the two of them. I think the first one is fine, even though, yeah. I think other countries have handled that question, the challenge of parents and so on differently. But I want to attend to the second question because Those of you who follow me on social media, from LinkedIn to whatever, you'll know that part of what I've been talking about was the challenge of skills and qualifications and the challenge of jobs. And I want to point that because someone mentioned this, whatever you call it, the education that's not university. And here's the thing, it's a very competitive world we live in. And I say that to young people all the time. And I said that yesterday when you have a news conference with me. Nobody owes you a job. That's the thing. The degree that you have, that's thousands and thousands of people who have it. That's the first thing we need to know. So brandishing your university education only doesn't work anymore. But what are qualifications for? When do you need a qualification? When do you need a skill? Right? Some people might not tell you, but qualifications are for gatekeeping and credentialing. They won't tell you. I will tell you. That's why they don't like me. I'll tell you. Sometimes we don't even need there are professions and industries that require specific qualifications. Like you cannot be a medical doctor or a lawyer or engineer, whatever, without certain what. So that's standard. But there are many instances where we need someone in the HR department or I need a PA or an executive. I don't even need a degree. I need someone who can do the job, but I will put a degree there. I can even put a master's degree because I don't want to get 1 million applications. Because there are too many people who don't have. And someone has to tell you that truth, young person. That's why when you have an internship, you want to make sure that they can't go on without you. They remember you. Okay. So the qualifications are for gatekeeping and credentialing. Right? As I've talked about the other places. That's why in some cases they would say, lots of people need a job, it's a low-skilled job. They say, if you have a matric, one side, if you don't have a matric, go home. After that, we look at the group. If it's too big, we say, if you didn't study mathematics at matric, one side, what are we doing? We're trying to reduce the numbers. We use whatever. It's a criteria, yes. Yeah, well, some criteria is not necessary. Let me tell you, since I retired in 2023, I've hired a lot of people. I promise you, I've never asked them for a degree. Because I need their skill. I don't even care where they got the skill. I need their skill. They run a farm, it's my money. I have no time or money to waste. Can you see what I'm saying? And any business also it's about money. So it's about time that we think that way. So skills, how do you get a skill? The skills are important, okay? And some of the skills, of course, are built on the basis of theoretical understanding that formal education provides. So when you go to university, you get this theoretical understanding, philosophical, whatever. The skill is built on top of that. But some of the skills come with the talents that I have. Nobody taught me public speaking. But if you're going to be a leader, you need to take people to some top of the mountain that they don't know. They need to believe you that we can get there, and part of convincing them is how you present the vision to them. You sell the journey to top of the mountain. So if you're a young person, I encourage people to do a personal skills audit. When I do that. So that you don't only sell your degree. So when companies send people, say, and they go for someone who doesn't have a degree, it's because there's a lot at stake when you run a company. You're not just there to give people jobs. You want productivity. You want things to happen. It's not government. It's not like you can go on and do what you like and tomorrow you still get a salary. No. You don't, and we will fire you when we entrepreneurs. The problem is when you work for government and big corporates, or in a public sector, you don't understand where money comes from. You think it just grows. But when you have worked in corporate or you run your own business, you know that you make the money. They make money, I pay them more. They make less, I pay them less. They make less, I'll fire some of them. Comfortably so. We just don't have the resources. So the skills are important in terms of how you how companies make decisions. So young people or everybody, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a big discussion. It's a nuanced debate, the debate between qualification and or skill. And where do the skills and what skills are those? The skills is not just industry experience. It's not just industry experience, but it's also attitude. Attitude. There are some young people, it doesn't matter how qualified they are, I don't want them. I don't want to work with them. And that's the thing, so then people say, well, what about my knowledge? We can teach someone to get that knowledge. And so it's a very interesting space when you come to skill and whatever, and people deliver. There's a company that I'm working with that we hire a lot of people who are rehabilitated prisoners. Rehabilitated prisoners. I mean, I stopped, when I started working with them, I used to ask them, how many years do you spend, how many? These guys work damn hard. They work damn hard, they'll do. I've never had a cell phone being lost. No computer. You leave a room with 5 laptops and 5 cell phones, nobody steals it. I mean, it's a fascinating, and maybe it's because they realize this company cares for us. They take us seriously. We pay them well. Because they deliver. I won't tell you what they do. Because I don't want you to figure out which company is this. But whereas graduates, these are people who are in prison. Some of them don't even have matric. I don't even know who's got matric. I don't care. This is business, right? So we are in a bubble when you work for the public sector, even in a university, because whatever you do, your salary is coming tomorrow. Yeah, whatever you do, even if you don't do it. So I think it's not industry experience. And of course, sometimes what we call industry experience, we write so many years, it's also a gatekeeper. We're trying to reduce the numbers. Have you, anyone who has worked, we take the numbers down and so on and so forth. So it's a nuanced debate, but it's an important debate in South Africa today, Yancy, because we've got so much complaint about lack of jobs. At the same time, I work with young people, many of them are dropouts, and they work online. They do work for countries in the Northern Hemisphere. So when you are sleeping, they are waking. They're the ones who do reviews for Google, for Amazon, for whatever. The more you do, the more you get paid. They're the ones that give them feedback. They're smart. They know how to write reports. They know how to... Now with a degree, you are waiting for a particular job and you don't get it. But the person who's a dropout, who couldn't pass accounting 1, is managing to do this. They teach English as a foreign language. They did a course on English, teaching English as a second language, and they teach Europeans English they do 3 hours a week or a day, whatever. But it's an important debate. I literally think I can run a conference just on you can get a job without a degree anyway. But the degree is important. It will also make you stand out because sometimes that's where we start. But it's not the only thing that gets you a job and gets you to advance.